روز سه‌شنبه 12 سپتامبر فرصتی دست داد که با آقای جاوید رحمان گزارشگر حقوق بشر سازمان ملل در امور ایران دیدار و گفتگو کنم. این مصاحبه در ساختمان دفتر مرکزی اتحادیه سراسری کارگران سوئد LO در استکهلم انجام شد. آقای جاوید رحمان سرگرم تهیه گزارش وضعیت حقوق بشر در ایران هستند و گزارش خودشون رو در ماه اکتبر به شورای حقوق بشر سازمان ملل ارائه خواهند کرد و بعد این گزارش در مجمع عمومی سازمان ملل مورد بررسی و رأی‌گیری قرار خواهد گرفت. آقای جاوید رحمان با مهربانی به پرسش‌های من پاسخ داد، از آن میان این که مکانیسم کار اونها چیست که جنایات روی داده شده در ایران مشمول مرور زمان نشود، چرا رژیم ایران به او اجازه سفر به ایران رو نمیده، دیدارهای او با شاهدان و خانواده‌های جانباختگان و پیام و سخن او به خانواده‌هایی که عزیزانشان توسط رژیم ایران کشته شدند و از سازمان ملل درخواست پیگیری دارند چیست؟ همینجا باید توضیح بدم که برگردان صحبت‌های جاوید رحمان از انگلیسی به فارسی توسط هوش مصنوعی صورت گرفته و زیرنویس شده است. از نارسایی‌های احتمالی در ترجمه همینجا پوزش می‌خواهیم. دعوتتون می‌کنم به شنیدن و دیدن این مصاحبه. جاوید رحمان بسیار خوش آمدید. من خیلی خوشحالم که با شما مصاحبه میکنم.
I'm very glad that I can have this opportunity to interview.
من نخستین سوالم اینه که جدیدترین کار شما در رابطه با نقض حقوق بشر و کشتار شهروندان در ایران چیه؟ الان روی چه پروژه‌ای کار میکنید؟
What is your first project concerning the situation of human rights in Iran and the massacre of the protesters in Iran?
Yes.
And what you do?
Thank you. So as the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran, I'm mandated to report to the Human Rights Council every year and to the UN General Assembly. So the immediate next work that I'm doing is I'm preparing to make a presentation and to present my report to the United Nations General Assembly, which will take place in October. And I will be reporting on the human rights situation in the past months and the past year. And therefore, that is my most immediate project that I'll be doing.
در سازمان ملل وقتی که آقای جاوید رحمان گزارششون رو میدن
when you as a human rights reporter delivering your yearly report
بعد این منجر به صدور قطعنامه‌هایی میشه در محکومیت رژیم ایران.
Usually it resulted in a statement in condemning the Iranian regime.
این چه مکانیزمی داره و آیا تأثیری بر رفتار رژیم ایران هم داره؟
Does this statement has any effect on the regime way of treating the prisoner, the protester or the opposition in Iran?
It does. You're right that I'm very critical of the violations of human rights, and therefore it's reflected. These violations are reflected in my reports. unfortunately, in several previous reports and in several years that I have been the mandate holder, the situation has gone from bad to worse. It's become very bad human rights situation. There are lots of violations, particularly from last year, as you know, from 16th of September. And therefore, I raised my concern. So last year, I raised my concern before the UN General Assembly in October, and earlier this year in March before the Human Rights Council. And in response to your question as to the impact, I think there is a huge impact. I mean, my job is to raise awareness, to raise concerns before the international community, before individual states, before various stakeholders, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, before the media, before the journalists, so that collectively they can exert pressure and influence on the authorities in the Islamic Republic of Iran so that they do not or they reduce any form of violations of human rights in the country.
ممنون. آیا در گزارش‌هایشون از شاهدان هم کمک گرفتن، یعنی در دیداری که با شاهدان
Does you have, before when you are preparing your report, do you have any kind of contact or meeting with those witness which you are going to what you call it, mention in your report?
Yes.
Does it help you?
Yes, because my reports are reliant on the witness testimonies, on the evidence of victims themselves, their families. So before writing the report and before completing the report, we make sure that any information that we get is confirmed as accurate. And it is also the case that we seek the consent of the individuals who provide their, the testimonies and the evidence, because we have to make sure that they agree to providing that kind of information. So it is based on accurate information, and reporting has to be completely accurate. And in addition to various sources, I'm heavily relying on people both within Iran and outside.
مثل جاوید رحمان، از اونجایی که جنایت مشمول مرور زمان نمیشه و نباید بی مجازات هم بمونه.
As you know that when these crimes should not be forget by the time, and it should be always be what you call it as a actual cases.
شما موردی کار میکنید؟ مثلا دهه 60 کشتار شهروندان در تظاهرات خیابانی در سال 96 98 و قتل زندانیان در زندان و تا کودک کشی و کشتن شهروندان در خیابان در همین تظاهرات در جنبش انقلابی زن زندگی آزادی، یا اینا رو هم وصل میکنید مثل یک نخی؟ اینو از این نظر میپرسم که فراموش نشه.
Yeah. So all of these individual cases are connected to the various themes, So you mentioned this movement, Women, Life, Freedom, from last year, September. It started from individual cases, the killing and the death in custody of Jina Mahsa Amini on 16th of September started the mass nationwide protests. Yeah. And within those protests, there were many individual girls, children, men and women who were killed. So while the protests were going along, the continuation of the theme was there, the mass national protest. So they're all part of the same, the same analysis and the same reporting. So I was looking at individual cases, but also at the nationwide protests, how the security forces were killing people recklessly, I looked at Balochistan, for example, the Bloody Friday, the 30th of September. We looked at the Kurdish situation. We looked at other minority regions. So within that situation, we were also looking at individual cases. For example, when people got killed or were seriously injured.
برای منظور من اینه که فراموش نشه از دهه 60 تا کنون.
I want to emphasize that these crimes should not be forgotten by the time. Mm-hmm. This is happened in 1980 until now. Mm-hmm. So this crime has been continuing in different levels, in different intensity. Mm-hmm. So I hope that they should not be forgotten.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You know that for crimes in international law, there is no limitation period. So whenever a crime has taken place, justice must be done. Therefore, in the context of Iran, regardless of whether the crime was committed in 1980, 81 or 88, that remains a crime. It's not a closed case. So in my mandate, we have investigated and we continue to investigate what happened to the large-scale executions that took place in 1981. Yeah? What happened to the summary arbitrary executions in 1988? And if you look at my reports, in every report, I ask the international community to hold individuals accountable who are perpetrators of these crimes, of serious crimes in international law, including the crimes in the 1980s, in the 1990s, and of course the crimes that took place in 2019 and last year. So, as I say, there's no time limitation. There is a responsibility on the international community to hold these perpetrators accountable, regardless of whenever these crimes took place.
مثل جاوید رحمان مرگ‌هایی قتل‌هایی در زندان‌های ایران اتفاق میفته و زندانیان سیاسی امنیت جانیشون در خطره.
There is always some kind of very discreet killing in Iranian regime prisoners, and especially the political prisoner. They have no security. They have no opportunity to save themselves.
آخر نمونهش نرگس محمدی بوده که هشدار داده.
دادمان نرگس محمدی.
راجع به جان خودش بعد 14.
He said that she said my life is in danger and 14 other prisoner, political prisoner.
بعد 14 تا
has also
از اوین به
have been moved from Evin to Qazal Pesha. So as you know, this prison is very well known, and actually the regime wanted to close that.
به هر حال قتل‌ها و مرگ‌هایی در زندان‌های ایران اتفاق افتاده که بهش میگن مرگ‌های خاموش.
This is there are some cases very undiscovered or very not clear death in Iran, and they call it the death. They call it the silence death in Iranian regime.
برای رژیم مسئولیت مرگ اینا رو به عهده نمیگیره.
And regime doesn't accept responsibility for their deaths in the prison.
یا مسموم میشن یا بر اثر پیامدهای شکنجه.
There have been by prison, what you call it, prison.
prisoners,
or they can be knocked down.
سوال من اینه، آیا در گزارش هاشون به این مورد اشاره کردن؟
Have you noticed about these so-called silence deaths in the Iranian regime's prison?
Thank you. Yes, if you look at my previous reports, this subject has been very extensively covered by my mandate. In fact, the situation as regards prison conditions was part of my focused analysis and criticism even prior to the COVID situation developed. So I looked at the prisons, the worsening situation of prisons, the overcrowding, the infections, and the maltreatment of prisoners in many of the prisons. So I remember that in that report I said that there are at least 70 persons who have died since 2010. Their deaths are state responsibility because they have either been killed by the state or the state has deliberately put them in a position of vulnerability or in a situation where their death took place and the state must accept responsibility. So I investigated these deaths in prison when they are in the custody of the state. And in accordance with the international human rights law, when a person is in the custody of the state becomes responsible for their life. So any violation of their right to life is a direct responsibility of the state. See, that is where the international law is very clear that the state cannot deny responsibility. You see, so all the deaths that have taken place in state custody are the responsibility of the state. And of course, what happened last year, that is why I have said that the state is directly responsible to what happened to Gina Mahsa Amini, but many other individuals as well when they died in state custody. So that's something that I have looked at in all of my previous reports. But coming back to the individual cases, I will say that we focus on human rights, and the right to life, right not to be tortured, right not to be maltreated, is a fundamental human right. And when a person is in the custody of the state, if there has been instances where right to life has been violated, or they've been tortured or ill-treated, or if they are denied the right to health, which in many cases happens, that prisoners are in fact not given adequate health treatment. And I have come across so many of the prisoners whose right to health has been denied. The state is directly responsible if there are consequences. And in many instances, these individuals do not get appropriate health care, and tragically and unfortunately, death occurs, and therefore the state is directly responsible.
مثل جاوید رحمان، آیا شما با مقامات رژیم جمهوری اسلامی در ایران تماسی داشتی؟ چرا به شما اجازه سفر به ایران نمیدن؟
Yes, if you look again at my mandate, the resolution which authorizes my mandate, as well as my reports, you'll find that I consistently and regularly ask the Iranian authorities to respect the resolution upon which my mandate is established, and to allow me access to the country, because that is so central to my work as a special rapporteur, that I go and meet people directly. I look at the situation and then report to the international community. But the problem has been that the Iranian authorities have not allowed me access to the country. And in fact, not only have they not allowed me, but my predecessors, since the mandate was renewed. We had Dr. Ahmed Shahid and then Madam Asma Jahangir. None of them were allowed access to the country. And as I have engaged with the Iranian authorities, I've tried to seek out an answer as to why they deny me access. My understanding is that they do not consider my mandate, in their eyes, to be a legitimate one. They say that this is a political mandate. It's just not a legitimate UN mandate, and therefore they think that because they don't recognize me and my work and the legitimacy of my work, they will not allow me access to the country.
شهروندان در ایران، خانوادهایی که عزیزانشون توسط جمهوری اسلامی کشته شدن یا اعدام شدن، گاهی مراجعه میکنن، پیامی میفرستن در رسانه‌های اجتماعی، از سازمان ملل میخوان که پشت پناه اونها باشن. به خانواده‌های داغدار که عزیزانشون توسط ماموران حکومت اسلامی کشته شدن چه دارید بگید؟
Yeah. So there are many ways which I can support them. So when a family member comes to me, I talk to them, I seek the information. If these people, their relatives, are in prison and I get their consent, I try to obtain as much possible information as I can to see why they have been charged, why they have been convicted, for how long they have been in prison, what did they do. So once I seek that information, and if I have the consent, I can then reach out directly to the Iranian authorities. So if you look at the past several years, we have issued many communications on behalf of individuals who are arbitrarily detained or put in prison. So that's one way of seeking their release. And if they have been tortured, if they have been, if there are other violations, so we engage with the Iranian authorities directly. Another way is to issue a press release, and I have issued many press releases, and the idea is that the international community gets to know about that, So we regularly issue press releases. They're more on the thematic basis, like, for example, the violation of women's rights, for example, on the question of hijab, veiling laws. Yeah, so that's one avenue. The other one is going to the international community directly. So I have in a number of my reports, I have mentioned names of individuals, and I reach out to various countries so that they can exert their influence and seek questions from the Iranian authorities as to why these individuals have been detained arbitrarily, or why the trials are unfair in terms of international human rights law. So my objective is to seek that justice is done, or to do my best that a just outcome takes place. I also try to reach out to the Iranian authorities to provide remedies to those individuals who have been unlawfully detained, arrested, and there are many consequences of unfair trials, So I try to seek redress. I try to obtain remedies directly through approaching in a diplomatic way the authorities who have detained those individuals.
مرسی. در پایان من یک سوال داشتم. جناب جاوید رحمان رئیس کل بدن اینجا دادگاه حمید نوری که حتما در جریان هستن محکوم شده.
You come here, you are visiting in Stockholm, and I know that you know about the Hamid Nouri what you call it?
Trial?
Trial.
اخیراً خبرهای منتشر شده
Recently there is some rumors
که حمید نوری رو میخوام با یک زندانی سوئدی یوهان فلودروس مبادله بکنن. همین ماجرا در بلژیک هم اتفاق افتاده.
This is what you call it rumors. They said that Swedish authority want to exchange Hamid Nouri with Johan Flodros. Yes. Or we had the same thing in Belgium. Assadi was being exchanged to other Belgian citizen.
Yeah.
What is
نظرشون چیه؟
what do you think about this?
Yeah. So you see, I work on human rights issues, and my job is to highlight violations of human rights and to seek justice for all those whose rights have been violated. So I do not believe that we should do injustice to people. We believe in justice, and as I just said, that the Hamid Nouri case goes back to the 1988, massacres and the summary and arbitrary execution of thousands of prisoners. So we have to do justice to the victims and their families of 1988. And therefore, I would say that to ensure justice, and I just said that there's no time limitation. If somebody has done gross human rights violations, even though they were in the 1980s, they must be held to account. They must be held accountable. The perpetrators must be brought, and justice must be done. So this should be the primary purpose of law, of a fair trial. This person must face a fair trial, but once there is evidence and these people are convicted, then in my view and in accordance to the mandate that I perceive, I cannot suggest or advocate that these people are then just swapped or exchanged for another person who was innocently detained and arbitrarily treated and tortured in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I am not in favor of that, of these exchanges. The other concern that I have is that if these exchanges or prisoner swaps do take place, it would encourage the various elements within the Islamic Republic of Iran to then conduct more hostage taking, so that they can either get money or they can have some other way, some other returns, and therefore it's a means of income for them, or a means of having a leverage, having power through an unjust way, through hostage taking. So I cannot support that kind of behavior.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.